Pittsburgh Steeler fans, welcome once again to the BehindTheSteelCurtain.com family of podcast you have stumbled upon, or maybe you were waiting impatiently for the next edition of the Steelers Q&A, the artist formerly known as the Steelers Hangover, and it will be known as that once again when the Steelers start playing again. But it doesn't matter as long as we are here together with you. That's all that counts for me, Tony Defio, my good friend. How are you?
I am great, Brian. I am fantastic. How are you?
I am doing well here in Maryland. It is a beautiful day once again, and we're getting after it. You know, as you can see, I am dressed in a tie today, and it is because of in my professional life, I am back out there and doing what I do on my other job, my less fun job than what I do here at Behind the Steel Curtain. So just got back in and ready to talk some Steelers, Tony.
I'm ready, man. It's the middle of July or June, so we're getting closer and closer to training camp, I hope.
Yes, that's the big thing. Keep those fingers crossed, cross whatever you can, because I really need Pittsburgh Steelers playing football in my life. And that's hopefully what is going to be happening. And we're going to talk about those players that might make a jump. But before we do that, I got to thank all of you in the live chat and remind you to, if you are not subscribed, we are so close to our latest goal. We're about 250 subscribers away from 6,000. And if you're not subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe. And remember, you can catch us not only here live, but you could also catch us on any platform that you find podcasts. I went and found about 5 the other night, just looking around, finding 5 platforms that we were on, and I registered in all of them, just because that's what I wanted to do, to see if they pop up, and here we were. So some great names, some great contributors that I already see in the live chat joining us. We've got Brad, Wes, Ezra, Daredevil, Dennis, my man Dennis with the holy chin straps. It's the bad man and Tony. I like that. John Trent's in here, Snowman, our buddy. If I've mentioned Ezra already, we've got Seth Bell in here too. So just to name a few that are with us early to catch up with us and that love to talk Steelers. I see Dave Shipley and Brad Jewett as well. Glad to see you, all of you. And remember, we can't do the show without you. You're what makes us run. So we love you. If you do want to get to the top of the queue, that's what that special button that has a little $sign on it, that it's our super chat. If you want to get your question up there, you can throw in a little tip for BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. And what we do is that goes towards things like microphones, going towards giveaways as well too. So if you do want to get to the top, go ahead and do that. But with that being said, let's get right into it, Tony. I am loving the fact that I'm getting to watch a lot of old highlights, and not so old highlight stuff from 2012, 2013. And one of the things that I never forget is how people like to throw out that bust word a lot, Tony.
Oh yeah.
And I think and this is not about busts. We have this topic has nothing to do with busts, but the reason I'm bringing that up is there's some players that it takes time for them to get acclimated. It seems like when Dick LeBeau was here, if you drafted a defensive player, you really weren't going to see them contribute too much until their second year. Would that be correct, Tony?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was a very sophisticated defense back in the day. I mean, really sophisticated, the 3-4 zone blitz. So yeah, a lot of these guys, like Cam Heyward's a perfect example. It took him a good while to learn that defense. That's
one of the guys on my list. Another one, and here's a really good one. It's Barry Foster. Barry Foster was drafted in 90, and he didn't take off until 1992.
Right.
In fact, you remember Barry had that big mistake in San Francisco where he just let a kickoff go and just roll in the end zone, and they got a touchdown on it because he didn't realize that it wasn't like a punt where they can down it. So
I can still
go ahead, Tony.
I'm sorry. I can still hear the legendary late great Bill Walsh saying that's a live ball. Like, and I knew that. I knew it. I was like 18, and I knew that was a live ball. I don't know what he was thinking.
Yeah, so we're like, no. But next thing you know, 2 years later, he's running for 1,690 yards and is still the single season rushing leader in Pittsburgh Steelers history. So, he took some time to figure it out and got an opportunity. Another guy that if you were you'd be shocked, but if you weren't watching in 2003, you would have thought that Troy Polamalu was a bust. The way I am glad we did not have the blog platforms, the podcasts and all that, because everybody would have been down on that guy as much. I mean, we still have the internet, but a lot of people considered him a bust. Next year comes around, boom, he's like runner up for defensive player of the year. He's a superstar. Now Troy Polamalu is in the Hall of Fame, or getting ready to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. So, as far as that goes, it takes some guys time to make that jump. We just saw a huge jump from last year, and it was Bud Dupree. I mean, you could say, okay, it was a contract year. Something happened, and he went from, okay.
Right.
He went from, a lot of people were calling him Bud the Dud to Bud the Stud, just like that. I wasn't, because I always believed in Bud Dupree, and I have the podcast to back that up. But there are guys like that it just takes a while, Tony Defio, to get these guys going. And I'm looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers roster, and I'm thinking that there could be some guys that could make that jump from, average or above average player to star. And do you have any of those in mind, Tony?
Oh, I have a few. I think James Washington. I still think his 2019 season is being overlooked. I think he made a really big jump last year without Ben. So I'm looking for more great things from him this year. With Juju coming back to full strength, and obviously Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool, and on the defensive side, I'm hoping that Terrell Edmonds makes a leap. I mean, he's been the new Bud this offseason. People are saying he's a dud. He's a dud. So hopefully he can make that jump. Not that we've talked about this before, not that he's been really bad, but I guess he hasn't been that splash player that you would hope from a former first round pick. So maybe he can make some strides this year.
And I'm still one of those guys that if Bud was taken in the second or third round, excuse me, not Bud, Terrell Edmonds, Fidarius, by the way, that's his first name. If you did not know that Terrell Edmonds' real name is Fidarius. So, I'm thinking that he would be viewed as a better player if he was never a first round draft pick with the same skill set. So that's what I'm thinking there. But there are some other guys. So let's start with your first one there. James Washington from Oklahoma State, going into his third year. Now, a lot of people were thinking that, he is going to be a superstar if he just sticks with Mason Rudolph. And that didn't happen, even though they had that great connection, that cowboy connection. I called them the Steel Cowboys. And, but those Steel Cowboys just weren't getting it done together. But you know what? It's funny because you saw James Washington, you saw a little spark in that New England game. I mean, that long pass from Ben to Washington. And but you also saw a huge spark when Duck was in there too. It seemed like Duck and James Washington were actually more cohesive, and they worked better together. So it wasn't just the fact that it was Mason. It was just, maybe he just hasn't had the time to go ahead and get it all together. But you kind of saw that last year because a lot of people don't realize this. This guy, the guy we're talking about, James Washington, was the leading receiver for the Steelers last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
He had more than Deontay Johnson. He had more than Juju Smith-Schuster. Juju Smith-Schuster had a rough year. Everybody expects him with Ben back to rebound and also to be healthy. And as I look across here, I'm looking at another guy. Dave Shipley says it took Stallworth a while. And, I agree with that one too, Dave. Thanks for bringing that up because here's the thing. Bradshaw was another guy. Somebody mentioned him earlier. It might have been Snowman. I'm not sure who mentioned it. So if I'm crediting it wrong, I do apologize. But Bradshaw was another guy. It took him 4 years to get going. Bradshaw had a guy in Lynn Swan who was his number one guy who he believed in. And I remember reading his book when I read Bradshaw's book, saying that at the beginning it was Swan, but at the end, I counted on Stallworth so much more.
Yeah.
And so, what I'm saying, it does take a while for some of these guys to get going, but someone's going to make a leap this year. Not sure exactly who it is, but we have candidates. So I'm definitely thinking that James Washington, and if you go ahead and look at the graphic that we put together for this show, when it comes out, you're going to see James Washington is front and center on there. Here's another name that you mentioned, and I'll go ahead and bring it out. Terrell Edmonds. He has an opportunity to go ahead and make a jump this year. And the reason that he could make a jump is because, one, he has a full year with Minkah Fitzpatrick as a running mate. He also is. He also had some splash plays last year where he looked good. But he seemed, if you just take year 1 to year 2, I thought it was a much better year 2 than year 1. And I want to bring up this guy, another guy that was the opposite. He looked half decent during year 1, and it was Artie Burns. Year 2, it started to fall apart. And then year 3, it was like over.
Right.
So with a guy like Artie Burns, he went in the opposite direction. Actually, a lot of people thought he was going to be great, and he disappointed. A lot of people did not want Terrell Edmonds. You and I, we were live on the air that night in the old Blog Talk Radio days, and we were like, who is this guy? Don't they know that Edmonds went to the Bills? Did they make it in? But it's funny because the day of the draft, I'm looking at mock drafts the day before and the day of. The first time I ever saw his name mentioned. And I was like, wow, what's going on here? But another reason a lot of people take exception to Edmonds is the fact that, he was picked ahead of Lamar Jackson.
Right.
So, that's something you could look at. But I think Terrell Edmonds has the makeup to go ahead and go forward this season and really become a solid player. And remember, with Edmonds, Tony, I always say that you don't need him to be a superstar. You need him to be a solid contributor, a good piece of the puzzle. What do you see? You mentioned Edmonds earlier. What are you really seeing in Edmonds' game that could take him to the next level?
Well, just the fact that he started 2 years in a row. That to me, I think that's a good sign for a young player for them to stick with him. You mentioned Artie Burns. He regressed after he started midway through his first year, and then by his second year, he was pretty much regressing. And by the playoffs, I mean, you saw how often he got beat in that playoff game against Jacksonville. I think just the fact that Edmonds has started 2 years in a row, I think that's if he hasn't picked up the playbook by now, I don't think he ever will. So I think just the fact that he's been in there and he hasn't been a major liability, I think that's and plus his athleticism. And we've seen his athleticism on display on those rare occasions when he has made a splash play like a interception or a fumble recovery, where he has that burst of speed that you don't realize he has because he's a safety, so you don't get to see him on screen as much as some of the other players. So I just think the fact that he's started consistently, I think that's just going to allow him to continue, hopefully, to build a foundation and become a better player. And I think they're going to need that because, like we talked about last week, Minka wants to be he wants to freelance more this year. So if you're free safety, he's freelancing. Your strong safety, he's going to have to play a lot of. He's going to have to back him up. And if he doesn't have his back properly, that could spell doom and gloom for the secondary.
I can't say it better than that. That's a really good assessment, Tony. So let's go ahead and take a look at some other guys that could be a possibility to make that jump. And I'm going to pick a guy here that I think he's been good. He wasn't drafted high. He wasn't drafted at all. But Matt Filer is a guy that I really think is going to make that move into one. I think he's the strongest of the offensive linemen. They don't call him the anchor for nothing.
Right.
He's strong, but I really think that this could be the year, no matter where he starts, whether it's guard or tackle, where he jumps up to that next level and becomes the guy on that offensive line, along with some other mainstays that you are not wanting to get rid of. Nobody wanted to get rid of him in the offseason. A lot of people thought he was a priority to sign, and now he signed his tender. He's here. He's playing for money, but I think he's playing for legacy, Tony.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's been a consistent starter the last 2 years at right tackle, and even last year, you mentioned his strength. They played in that one game at left guard when Ramon was injured. They put him there because Tomlin felt it would provide extra strength up the middle for guys like Aaron Donald for that awesome Rams front seven. So he has been a consistent starter, but he has yet to reach that Pro Bowl level. Maybe this year is the year that it finally really clicks and he takes it to that next level and goes from just a consistent starter to a Pro Bowl player. Because one thing about Ramon Foster, he started 10 years. He never got that Pro Bowl recognition. Perhaps he should have, but maybe this year Matt Filer could take it to that. Maybe there's another level for him in going from consistent starter to Pro Bowl player.
Now, let me ask you this, Tony. A lot of people brought this name up in the live chat. And Stephon Tuitt, he's not a superstar, but the way he started off last season, he looked like he was going to have a defensive MVP type season. And the way that Heyward started off last season, there was some worry. And then Tuitt goes down and Heyward continues superstardom. And really, if it wasn't for the forced fumbles, he had a year equivalent to Aaron Donald. So Tuitt got hurt. But is he the kind of guy that do you see him in this category as a guy that could just make that jump to that next level? He's at a higher level.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think?
I mean, even you mentioned last year the strong start. Even 2017, early on, he looked dominant. At the start of that season, and he had the torn bicep, and that he played the rest of the year. He missed a couple games, but he wasn't the player he could have been. That's the thing. When he's at his best, he looks like the most dominant player on the defense, at least on the defensive line or the front seven. So there is another level to his game, and I think if he can stay healthy, which has been a problem for him obviously the last few years, then I think you're going to see maybe not just a Pro Bowl player, but an All-Pro player, a guy who finally comes into his own in his 7th year. So he's definitely somebody that could, even though he's already talented, already a star, already has a big contract, he can still take his game to another level.
A lot of people think that he's one of those guys that is going to be what am I looking for here? He's one of those guys that is always going to be injured, and he's had a few injuries, but I mean, you know what? I still think if he's healthy that he's a defensive player of the year guy. Now, right. I'm going to one of my beloved partners on this show, I'm going to bring him up. I love Cam, but he's not the same caliber of Donald. Lance, look at his numbers last year. If it wasn't, and I'm just saying, I'm not comparing him, I'm just comparing his numbers. I think Donald is one of the best ever. But if you look at his numbers last year, the big difference was, I believe, 6 forced fumbles for Donald to 1, and everything else was equivalent. So that's why I'm saying that about Cam. But really what we're looking at here is Tuitt. Is Tuitt going to be the guy on that defensive line? Because the number one guy is still Cam on that defensive line. If you have them both playing at a high level next season, wow, look out.
Look out. Yeah.
And because look out, I mean, you have those guys. I mean, no, Cam's listed as a defensive tackle, but he's also, I mean, he's playing on the end. He's also, you're also looking at the opportunity for the linebackers to go ahead and be those guys as well, get into the quarterback. So we should be in really super shape if the big if is if people are healthy. Look, guys, I'm looking at the live chat here, and you guys are misconstruing what I'm saying about Aaron Donald and Cam. I'm not saying that Cam is on that level. I'm just, please look at their stats from last season.
I'm raising my hand. I want to interject. I know exactly what you mean. I've known it since last week when you were saying it. You're saying he's not Aaron Donald, but he's playing at maybe the best of his career right now, and he's not getting the recognition because he's not Aaron Donald. If his name was Aaron Donald, people would recognize what he's contributed to this defense the last couple of years. He had a monster year last year, Cam Heyward, and he didn't get the recognition for it. That's what you're trying to say. Not that he's that player. It's just that he's playing the best of his career at this his 10th year in the league, and he's playing it the best. That's what you're trying to convey. Not that he's Aaron Donald. It's just that he's really playing well. He's just not getting that recognition.
Yeah, and that's the thing, Tony. That's definitely the thing. That's what I'm saying, because I mean, this is really not a Cam versus Donald conversation. It's just telling you how good he was last year.
Right.
And that's really what I'm looking at here. But there you go. I don't want to get in the weeds on that. And I don't, we could do an entire show because this question is coming up now too. Ezra says, is Cam a Hall of Famer? He says, yes, just not first ballot. We could do an entire show on whether he's a Hall of Famer. I don't know. At this point, I don't know if he is a Hall of Famer at this point. If he continues to do what he does, possibly, but I would probably say he's on the fringe. Because you're looking at a guy that kind of reminds me of the Hines Ward situation. Defensive linemen and edge rushers and guys like that go after the quarterback, there's a lot of them. And there are a lot of them, just like Hines Ward. There's a lot of receivers out there too. So, we're not really going into a Cam. This is becoming the Cam show, and it's not supposed to be.
Well, it's harder for the Steelers or for defensive linemen to get recognition in the Steelers defense. It always has been. Look at going back to the days of Aaron Smith. His teammates were calling him the best defensive end in football for a number of years, and maybe he was, but playing in that defense, especially at that time, as you mentioned earlier, Dick LeBeau, how sophisticated it was. He couldn't rack up the stats because the linemen in those days, it was their main job to occupy as many blockers as possible. So it's just harder for a defensive lineman to get the recognition on the Steelers defense because it's all about the outside linebackers, the inside linebackers, and usually the safeties. That's usually who gets the recognition in the Steelers defense.
Okay, let's throw in 2 more guys. One, this will be quick. Isaiah Buggs. We haven't seen much of him. I mean, is he a possibility to take over where Javon Hargrave left off, or is the traditional nose tackle, that defensive tackle in this system, like you just mentioned with defensive linemen, are they just kind of lost in the shuffle there?
I think it's going to be hard for him to make an impression this year, simply because you have Chris Wormley, you added him to the mix, and then you have obviously Cam Tuitt and Tyson Alualu. So it's going to be a little harder for him, but he didn't really get a whole lot of opportunities last year. So maybe the fact that Hargrave isn't around, and maybe they finally move on from Big Dan, maybe he will get a opportunity to make a splash this year and make a jump from his first to his second.
Let's ask about Justin Lane now. So he came up earlier, and a lot of people love Justin Lane. I love Justin Lane. I really think he's the kind of player that is going to be very good in this defense. Somebody mentioned along the lines of Deshae Townsend, where it took Deshae out of Alabama when he was drafted in 1998 to take a while to get in there and get that opportunity. It also took Ike a while, somebody mentioned. But here's the thing. You've got Ike. You've got Deshae that we're comparing him to. Now you've got Justin Lane, who I think could be really good. But here's the best part about it. If you don't see him a lot this year, it's still not a bad thing.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Because if you see him more, especially starting, something happened where Joe Hayden is either hurt or not playing well, or Steven Nelson is hurt or not playing well. So that's really what you've got to look at there. I think he could be a very solid contributor on this team. Another guy that somebody mentioned that could make a big jump this year, I don't know, but Marcus Allen. He's another guy that this might be that year where he's really got to prove it, and he might not get the opportunity to. Tony, is this a make or break year for Marcus Allen?
I think so. It'll be his third year. He was a 5th or 6th round pick, and that room's getting more crowded. I mean, with Antoine Brooks and obviously some of the other players they brought in. So, yeah, I mean, if he's coming into his third year, he's a late round pick. You know, he's got to show something this year. He really has not shown anything his first 2 years, unless he develops into a special teams ace. That might be his only other avenue.
So let's go ahead and wrap this up with a recap of the guys that we've talked about here. And some of the guys that we talked about, I mean, on offense, we mentioned Filer. We mentioned James Washington. On the defensive side, we mentioned a guy like Justin Lane. We mentioned Terrell Edmonds. We even mentioned Marcus Allen just now, and even Stephon Tuitt. Guys that we didn't mention that you could probably throw in that mix would be Ola Denny, and Tuzar Skipper. Of those two, could we add those to the list?
I think it, especially Ola. I mean, we've been waiting on him. You know, he was a darling a couple of years ago, and he really hasn't shown a whole. I mean, he's been injured. That hasn't helped. But yeah, I think it's his time to really take that leap. He's heading into his third year, and there could be an opportunity. I mean, we keep talking about Alex Highsmith, and rightfully so, 3rd round pick. But you know, there could be a chance for somebody else to swoop in there and be that future starter opposite of TJ Watt if they decide to move on from Bud.
And Dave Shipley just asked, what about Benny Snell? Benny Snell could take a jump too. You never know. Ulysses Gilbert, John Trent, thanks for mentioning him. UG3, he's another guy that might get some more playing time. He was hurt towards the last 6 games before. So you have those 2 guys that were drafted last year. They could make big jumps as well too. So of all of those, who do you think is the most paramount? Who of all those players, and we mentioned about 8, do you think is going to make the biggest jump?
Who's going to make the biggest jump out of all those guys? I would have to go. Honestly, I think it's going to be because he's heading into his third year. I think it could be Edmonds. I think he has the most to prove out of all those guys we talked about. So I think he could potentially make the biggest jump, and I hope he does, because I think that could be the one of that. Now, obviously, the continued improvement of Devin Bush could really make that defense into an elite unit. I think it's already there, but it could really put the frosting on the cake.
That's good. I'm glad you mentioned that, and that's your pick, and I really like it. One guy that we didn't mention, and John Trent just brought him up, Cam Sutton could be that guy, and we didn't even mention Cam Sutton. He could be a guy that gets a new contract this year. He could push Mike Hilton out of the way. So we didn't mention him as well. There's a bunch of guys we could bring up. And the best part about this entire conversation is the fact that you have a lot of guys that, even though, yeah, they need to step up, but we have guys that have the ability to. And there's two more guys that just have been mentioned, Chooks and Samuels. I'm not a big Chooks fan. I think, but a lot of people on this blog site as well, on this family of podcasts, think I'm wrong. Namely, Dave Schofield thinks I'm wrong. And here's the thing, and you know me, I back it up when I'm wrong about something. I would love for Chooks to, prove me wrong,
Right.
because I've proven wrong a lot. So he's probably going to be good. But I'm just waiting for it. I just don't see it. One guy we didn't mention, and here's a big one. We didn't mention Mason Rudolph.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
If Ben is not back all the way, could Mason Rudolph make that jump?
Well, I mean, he's had, as I keep saying, the Steelers had a rare, even a blessing in disguise, kind of a silver lining, is they got a chance to see the guy that they hope can be the future guy. And Mason Rudolph played 10 games last year, and I mean, he didn't look great. We all agree on that. But can he grow from that? Can he grow? And if he does grow from that, that's gonna be big for the future of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I hope he does.
I just hope it's not this year. I hope he proves that he could be the future. I'm just hoping not this year. So with that being said, let's go ahead and bring up something from last week that I promised to go ahead and look into. And we were talking about the sack renaissance in Pittsburgh, Tony.
Mm-hmm.
And the sack renaissance of all these guys that have an opportunity to jump into the top 10. But there was that one caveat, that one problem. You have guys that are not in that top 10 because sacks were not counted until 1982. So I said I'd go ahead and take a look at those guys in the top 10 that weren't listed because they played before 1982. Right outside the top 10 with 40 was Ernie Holmes. So he would rank 11th.
Wow.
And the reason I'm bringing this up is because Mr. TJ Watt has 34.5. So he would need to go ahead and get 11.5 to tie number 10, which is Dwight White with 46. If we're talking about the unofficial Steeler top 10. And that's what we're looking at. So unofficially, number 10 is Dwight White. Number 9 now is Greg Lloyd with 53.5. Now dropping to number 8 is Cam Heyward with 54. At number 7 is Lamar Woodley. Now, Lamar Woodley, I believe he was number 4. He's 57, has 57. Keith Willis, he's at 59 with 6. So I think he drops down a notch or two. Number 5, Joey Porter, Mr. Peasy himself, has 60 career quarterback sacks for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's got a lot more if you combine where he was as a Miami Dolphin and an Arizona Cardinal. Now, number 4, Joe Green is number 4 with 66 career quarterback sacks. So that's the guy that's another guy. So that's a second guy that you're adding. You're going to add a third guy in there. 73.5, LC Greenwood. So then I know these off the top of my head. Number 2 at 77 would be Jason Gilden, and number 1, Debo with 80.5. So we talked about that last week. I wanted to go back to that, and I didn't want to forget that, and I looked it up. Guys like Ham and Lambert are still in the 20s. Andy Russell was in the 30s, actually. So there were some guys like that I mean, they would probably be ahead of or real close to what TJ Watt has now. But TJ still has an opportunity to get into the top 10. He can get into the official top 10, but it's even better if he gets into the unofficial top 10 because one, that gives him close to 12 sacks to get into the unofficial top 10. And the unofficial is better because it has those legends, White, Greenwood, and of course Green, and Holmes is right outside the top 10. So that's how huge
Right.
that defensive line was. Tony Defio, you have we were late on the show today, and that was because of I had a commitment. You do have a commitment, so I'm going to say goodnight to you and thank you. And we're not going to sign off, but you could tell me the catchphrase at the end, and we're not signing off, but I got to hear you say it just when you think you've got all the answers.
We keep changing the questions. And
okay, but we're not going to say goodnight.
No. See, I'm a diva, right? That's why I have to leave. It's not Brian's fault. It's my fault. I have to get my hair cut. If I don't get my hair cut, there's hell to pay for everybody. So it's really my fault. So I have to get a haircut.
I got mine yesterday. So
yes, it's a very important thing right now in 2020 to get your haircut. So
there you go. Priorities. So you go ahead. Thank you for your contributions. I appreciate it. And we will talk to you coming up on Steeler Brunch with Tony, and then next week on the show as well, the Q&A. But everybody stick around. We're going to have you guys all stick around, and we're going to say goodbye to Tony, and you just have me and me alone. So I love the question that Snowman's saying, what hair? I was going to ask that, but I didn't want to offend them. So let's go ahead. And I usually go ahead and type this in, but I'm just going to say questions for the show. We'll start off with questions. And Mule Skinner says we need to bring back Jeff to bring back more likes. Well, I got to tell you, it's June right now, so there might be less likes, but you will probably see a guest appearance. That's something that we will definitely need to do, because it was a great opportunity for him to leave, and I feel great about it. I'm so glad that he had that opportunity. So we will see him once again. We definitely going to have an after party. But so let's go ahead and get some questions for the show. If you have anything on your mind, and if you want to talk even more, you have any more of questions about some of the guys that we talked about earlier, those guys that we talked about that really need to make that big jump. John Trent asked this question: who do we resign, Brian? Who's more important, Juju, Connor, or some other player? Okay, so when you're looking at Juju and Connor, we knew we were going to have this problem. And the reason we knew we were going to have this problem was because that was such a good draft. Cam Sutton was in that draft. Of course, TJ Watt was in that draft. If I'm looking at it, I still think that if you just take the players away, I'm probably looking at, I'd rather have a superstar running back, because you have 3 or 4 options as far as that goes as a wide receiver. However, I love the fact that Juju is Juju, and he is a superstar running back, a superstar wide receiver. James Conner could be a superstar running back. And the thing about that, though, is the Pittsburgh Steelers have proved throughout the last 20 years that they can go ahead and they don't have to give a second contract to a running back. Dave Schofield brought this up on the show the other night on the preview. It was a trivia question. The last running back to get a second contract in Pittsburgh was, believe it or not, Verron Haynes. And he was drafted in 2002. So they can manufacture players at the running back position, especially in the Ben Roethlisberger era. If Ben Roethlisberger is healthy, I'm kind of keeping Juju as the mainstay, because I think he has the opportunity to really get back from last year and get back to elite status. So that's kind of the guy that I'm looking at, but I want to keep them both. The problem is I just don't think you're keeping them both. The one guy that I don't think you're going to be able to keep that I would add to that list, though, I'd love to see Bud Dupree have more time in Pittsburgh. I just don't think that he's ever going to be affordable enough to keep him. And if Alex Highsmith is able to step in for him, then you're okay. So those are the kind of guys that we're looking for. But if there's one guy that needs to be signed more than anybody else right now, it's TJ Watt. TJ Watt is definitely the guy that they have got to keep. So there you go. That's my answer to that there. I had another question that, and I have my adult ADHD, and so I lost that question. So if there is, if I missed your question and you want to throw it in again, please do so. I also saw a super chat up there, and I need to find that. And I believe the question was, who is the number 3? And as I'm looking through, here it is. Dave Shipley asked, who wins the number 3 job? Let's bring that up there. It's not going to be Duck Hodges. I just don't think, I don't think it's Duck. At this point, of course, we're pretty much penciling in 1 and 2 as Roethlisberger and Rudolph. I think Paxton Lynch has every opportunity to, I think the job's his if he wins it. But I'm really excited to see what JT Barrett can bring. I like JT Barrett a lot. I really think that he can add a really good dimension to this team, and I think he's a talent. Dallas Quinley throws in this. I'm just going to jump ahead because it goes on to, it relates to this question. Do Steelers even carry a third QB? They might not. They might play the practice squad game if they can. And that's something you look at. But here's the thing. If they're able to add more guys, it becomes a 55-man roster. And I know an offensive lineman has to be one of them. So you don't have to worry about losing an offensive lineman and making that decision, because you can add as long as you keep an offensive lineman on there. So that's something to take a look at there. Seth Bell, do you think Devin Bush will make that big jump in year 2? I think Devin Bush was very solid last year. I think he really well could have been a defensive rookie player of the year. He was not, but he's a guy that I think he gets even better. I really do. We didn't mention him as making a jump because he was kind of a guy that a lot of people felt were there. So that's kind of what I'm thinking on them. But I think he's going to have a much better second year than his first. And his first was, if you ask me, fantastic. That was really good. A lot of room to grow, though. But he shows every sign of being a guy that can grow into a superstar even more. I think we'd be shocked if he doesn't pan out at this point. I really like him. Ezra, who are you rooting for in training camp for the third receiver slot, Washington or Claypool? I say Chase just to justify passing on J.K. Dobbins. You know what? Here's my deal with that. I'm rooting for Washington and Claypool because I think you could have a 4-headed monster here. I don't think that it's really going to matter. You just got to make sure enough balls go around for these guys. That's the thing, because I mean, you can't play them all the time and have the tight ends in there. And I mean, you only get 11 guys on the field at one time, but with rotations and everything, this is a cop-out answer. But if I had to say something, I really want James Washington to thrive. He was the leading receiver, like we talked about earlier. I think Claypool's going to justify the selection anyways. It just goes down to what are your goals for him? My goal for Claypool would probably be about 5 touchdowns and 500 yards. That's what I'm looking at. Last year we were looking at 3 touchdowns for Deontay Johnson, and I believe he had 6. We didn't expect Deontay to do exactly what he was going to do. So, as long as you're getting production out of those 4 guys, I'm going to be pretty happy. You don't have to have a 1,400-yard receiver. If you have 4 guys that are in between 8 and 1,200, I mean, that's pretty good. And you got to think, if you've got a quarterback that's throwing 5,000 yards, you can have 4 guys anywhere between 8 and 1,200, and that's going to be an awesome stable of wide receivers. So that's really what I'm looking at there. Dallas Quinley asks, is McFarland our home run running back? He could be. I mean, he definitely could be. Does he see the field a lot this year? And I don't know. I really don't know how much he sees the field. They don't really give rookie running backs too much time unless somebody's hurt. And that's the only reason you saw Benny Snell Jr. last year. That's really the only reason you saw anything with Jalen Samuels 2 years ago, because in the Mike Tomlin era, they take a running back and they run the wheels off of them. And then they say, okay, who's next? And the next man up thing, I don't think works for running back. I would rather McFarland have an opportunity to be a home run running back. And I kind of like more of a running back by committee, or I don't mind having James Conner being the feature back, but rest him more and get guys some playing time. Alfred asked, did you see that that's Ezekiel Elliott, tested positive for COVID-19? Does a superstar player getting sick scare NFL into delaying the season? That's really interesting. Now, here's what ticks me off. And I got to tell you, and Ezekiel Elliott said it. He's like, wait a second, is this a HIPAA violation? Because he didn't release this. So is this a HIPAA violation? What was his privacy in this situation? What kind of privacy do you get? I mean, I really think you need to have some privacy here, and got leaked. I don't know. I don't think it's going to delay the season. The NFL is out to prove that they're going to do anything possible to start on time. I just don't know how it's going to work. Baseball's not officially back. Basketball supposed to be coming back. They're not back. Hockey's talking about being back. They're not back. So, there you go. I mean, I think they're going to try, but I'm looking more towards it being a 12-game season, actually. And I hope not. I won 16 games. I really want to see what this Pittsburgh Steelers team could do. Snowman, thanks for the $2. We appreciate it. Who will be the surprise cut at the end of camp? I don't really know if there's going to be a surprise, but will this be a surprise if it's Jalen Samuels? I don't think it's going to be a starter. So I don't look for someone huge to be cut, a big name to be cut, but I would probably say at this point, let's say Jalen Samuels on offense. Marcus Allen wouldn't be a surprise. So let's just throw out a crazy one. And this is an absolute crazy one. I don't think it's going to happen, but let's throw it out there. Mike Hilton. You never know. Mike Hilton, possibly, but that's just me saying that I'm throwing out a name because I don't know if there's going to be a surprise cut. Dave Shipley, this is just a comment. No fans means no increase in the cap. We're screwed. Yeah, that does mess us up if there's no fans. So John Trent throws this out as Vince Williams, and a few other Ezra says Vince Williams. Guys, I gotta disagree with you guys, and I don't disagree with you guys a lot. But here's the thing with Vince Williams. To me, I think he was so important to that team last year because really, remember week 3 against the San Francisco 49ers? Vince Williams was not in that game, and they ran all over Pittsburgh. I don't think they run all over Pittsburgh if Vince Williams is in there. That run defense, and nobody talked about the run defense, its correlation to the him being gone and Vince Williams being back, but I think it's huge. I need to probably put some stats and put a pencil and paper to it, but really, I got to tell you, I don't really think that Vince Williams is the guy that needs to go yet. I really don't, but that would be a huge surprise. And by the way, there's a few here in the live chat that's saying the no way to Hilton. Hey, that would be a surprise, though. I don't think it's going to happen. That would be a huge surprise. So with that, I just want to thank everybody for coming out to join us, Tony and myself. Remember, we can't do these shows without you. We love the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that's something we have in common. We're not always going to agree. We're not always going to disagree, but hey, that's the right we have as fans, and it's great. Think of BTSC and the family of podcast as your audio virtual sports bar. I'm just not serving wings. If I could find a way to serve wings or permani sandwiches to all of you guys, I would. That would be really awesome. But if I look distracted about 20 minutes ago, my wife just came in and showed me the phone and said, "Hey," and I couldn't make it out. Then I realized, because I saw her whisper "cap and cheese," so looks like Permanis is coming to my house. It looks like she's ordering out. So I'll share it all with you virtually in my mind. But hey, I love you all. Thank you very much. John Trent, thanks for the nice tie. My daughter got this for me. I am a Maryland resident and our crabs, but notice it's not black and purple, because that's even though I'm a Maryland resident, there's no black and purple in my life. I'm a black and gold guy. None of that black and yellow, black and gold. But hey, once again, thanks again. You will see me once again, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, on the Steelers preview coming up on a Thursday night. And once again on the Homer and the Hater. Tomorrow night, do not miss the Stat Geek with the brothers Schofield, Dave, and Rich. Don't miss the Standard is the Standard with Lance Williams, and I believe possibly Michael Beck, possibly myself. I haven't figured quite that out yet. And then on a Friday, it's I Said It with Lance Williams. I mentioned the preview with Michael Beck, Dave Schofield, myself already. Then on Saturday, it's brunch, Steelers brunch with Tony. And remember this, we're working hard for you. If you saw that interview last week with Chris Wormley, that was awesome. Michael Beck, Dave Schofield, they brought him in. We are working on getting some guys. In fact, I have been in touch, and I'm waiting to shore something up with a former Steeler. I have some calls out. Michael has some calls out. We all have some calls out. We're going to try to get some interviews. So keep looking for us to pop up with an interview, and keep on joining our family of podcasts. We love you all. So remember, just when you think you have all the answers, to quote the great Roddy Piper, we keep changing the questions. It's the Q&A. Good night. Thank you all.